The dust lay heavy across the plain, its golden weight caught in the morning light. When Caleb Harlow first saw her, thin wrists bound in rope, dark eyes sharp with fear though her lips trembled with words softer than the wind. "Please, don't touch me." He was a man known in these parts as a giant, broad in frame and quiet in his stride. Yet something in that plea struck deeper than the scorn of any saloon or the jeers of card tables. He cut her free without answering, and she recoiled from him as though his shadow itself were a threat. He did not press close, did not reach for her again, only motioned to his horse and began walking back toward the low hills where his cabin waited. She followed at a distance, steps small, head bent, every glance cast back as though escape might still be possible. In town they whispered before they even reached the square. A half-dozen women hushed their children and tugged them aside. The butcher leaned over his counter, and Mrs. Doyle, sharp-tongued widow of a merchant, muttered loud enough for the crowd to hear. Another squaw dragged in like cattle. The words sank like stones in Ahiona's chest, though she said nothing. Shame burned across her skin as she wrapped her arms over her torn dress. Caleb did not flinch, but his jaw tightened. He did not defend her with words, only with the steady placement of his body between her and the crowd, his hand loose on the reins as though daring anyone to step forward. Gossip was more dangerous than bullets here. Gossip lingered, poisoned, and clung. At the general store, the preacher Ezekiel Finch eyed Caleb hard, his voice coated with piety and judgment. "Best send her back before trouble rides in. The Lord frowns on thievery, even of souls." Caleb ignored him, bought flour and lamp oil, and left. The silence he carried was more defiant than any sermon. Ahiona noticed his restraint, how he never touched her, never even looked at her the way the other men did, as if she were both scandal and temptation. She feared him still, yet her fear began to tangle with confusion. At his cabin on the ridge, Caleb left her food and water on the table and walked out to the porch, laying his bedroll on the wooden boards under the stars. She listened from inside, expecting boots at the door, a hand at her shoulder, but none came. He slept with only the wind for company. On the second night she left a heel of bread on the step for him, a small act she could not name, and by the third night she mended the sleeve of his torn shirt with awkward stitches. He said nothing of it, but wore it the next morning. Trust grew slow as the seasons. She spoke little, but when she gathered wild herbs near the creek, she left some in a tin on his table. When he returned from the ridge with a broken fence rail, she set the hammer and nails beside him. Their eyes met only in fragments, like sparks that die before flame, but those fragments deepened. She saw that he carried loneliness like a scar no one else noticed, a wound just as deep as her own. But storms gather without clouds. One dusk, Caleb spotted Apache scouts watching from the ridge, shadows crouched like cougars in the grass. The next morning, rumors swept through town. 200 riders were coming to take her back, and maybe to burn every roof that sheltered her. Mrs. Doyle's voice rang shrill in the saloon. "It's his fault if blood spills. Let him give her back before we're all ash." Whispers filled the streets, muttering that Caleb Harlow had brought ruin upon them. Ahiona overheard everything. Terror clawed at her ribs. She knew her uncle, Chief Nantan, would ride at the head of those warriors, demanding her return. She knew they would kill Caleb without hesitation. And yet, when she looked at Caleb, she saw no fear. He sharpened no rifle, loaded no pistols. Instead, he repaired the barn roof, brushed down the horse, and carried water to the trough. His calm was not denial but something harder, acceptance of whatever storm would come. On the morning the earth shook with the thunder of hooves, Ahiona stood in the doorway, her knees weak. 200 warriors fanned out across the plain, their lances catching the sun, their faces painted in colors of war. At their head rode Nantan, tall and fierce, his gaze fixed on the cabin. Caleb stepped forward, unarmed, the giant figure against a tide of riders. The air cracked with silence before the first voice broke it. "She is ours," Nantan thundered. "She was taken. Return her, or we take her with blood." Caleb's voice was steady, quiet enough that men leaned in to hear. She is free. If she chooses you, she is yours. If she chooses me, she stays. The ground itself seemed to hold its breath. Ahiona trembled, her heart a war drum in her chest. Every eye, Apache and settler alike, waited for her step. For a moment she thought she might faint under the weight of it, but then something steadied in her. She remembered Caleb's silence in the nights, the bread he left untouched so she could eat first, the way he bore insult without passing it down to her. She walked forward, not toward her people but toward him. Slowly, deliberately, she placed her hand in Caleb's. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some cursed, some wept. Nanton's face was stone, but his eyes burned with a fury that trembled on the edge of grief. He raised his hand, and the riders began to wheel away, 200 shadows withdrawing into the horizon. It seemed the storm had passed, and yet the air still smelled of lightning. Then came the twist that froze every heart. From behind the riders, dragged forward by two braves, was a figure Ahiona had not expected to see again. Her younger brother, bound, bruised, thrown at Nanton's horse like a bundle. He had been captured weeks ago by settlers, bartered and beaten, and now returned as proof of her betrayal. Nanton's voice cut like iron. He suffers because you did not come back. Choose again, daughter of our blood. Tears blurred her vision. Her brother's eyes begged, not for freedom, but for her to live. She turned, every vein trembling, and looked up at Caleb. The giant man did not move closer, did not pull her to him. Instead he released her hand. You choose, he said, voice raw. Not for me, for yourself. Ahiona stepped forward alone, bent, and cut her brother's bonds with Caleb's own knife. She pulled him to his feet, then turned to Nantan. I am not taken. I am not stolen. I stay because I choose to. The warriors shifted, restless, waiting for Nantan's command. But the chief only stared at her, as if seeing her not as a girl, but as something harder, unyielding. At last he turned his horse. Then we leave you to the white man's shadow. He rode off, and the plain emptied with the sound of receding thunder. The town watched in stunned silence. Mrs. Doyle's lips parted but no words came. The preacher lowered his gaze. And Ahiona, with her brother leaning on her shoulder, walked back to Caleb. She did not take his hand this time. She did not need to. He opened the cabin door, and for the first time, she stepped through it without hesitation. Later, when the lamps were lit and the night had gone still, an old voice might recall it this way. Sometimes the fiercest battles are not won with rifles or with blood, but with the courage to stand still while the world demands you run. Sometimes love is not fire at first sight, but a quiet shelter built one gesture at a time. And sometimes the greatest freedom is found not in leaving, but in choosing where to stay. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.